Welcome to the A2 Show with Andrew Cass and Aaron Parkinson, bringing you the trends and topics that affect our lives the most: business, politics, fitness, family, and finance. With over 50 plus years of combined business experience and over $1 billion in revenue generated, your hosts have a unique gift for seeing many steps ahead where others do not. They bring their unfiltered, contrarian views to the show every week to help you win in business and in life.
Speaking of seeing many steps ahead, we're going to talk about the steps we see ahead in 2025 today. It's a year-end show. At the time of this recording, it is December 20th, 5 days before Christmas 2024. And we thought we would go on the fly today, nothing scripted or planned, and talk about what we predict and see in our core 5 categories. When you hear our intro to the show, we talk a lot about these 5 core categories. Business politics tends to dominate our show because we have a business and a business background. But then fitness, family, finance. Finance is a big one too. What do we see going into 2025? And then maybe what are some of the things we're doing specifically in these 5 categories for 2025. We talked a little bit about that one before the show. So happy holidays to you, Aaron. Happy holidays to our viewers. Even if you're watching this a year or two later, I like to come back to the prediction shows to see if we were right.
Yes.
Right?
Always fun.
So like July, August, we go, remember that show we did on December 20th, 24? How are we doing with those predictions? We have pretty good foresight, you and I. We have a pretty good track record of foresight.
You were pretty excited when Bitcoin went bananas last 2 weeks because you were telling
Well,
me
our last show was the parabolic move over 100,000, and it got to 107,000, and is now back to about 95,000, which is awesome.
Yeah, well, and you were saying, look, I predicted this year. You know, you've talked about predicting what would happen with COVID and with the elections and all that stuff. So it's always fun to make predictions and see if you're right. And I think today it's really talking about not just predictions that are going to happen in the world in 2025, but what we're doing because we are thinking about those predictions, what we're doing personally. And so maybe I'll kick it off today because we were just talking about this, for the call, and we're actually doing something.
It's your idea.
Similar.
You kick it off, and you tell us how we want to make this thing go.
Perfect. So one of the things that you and I were talking about right before we went live was what we're doing with our businesses. We are tripling down on efficiency and operating systems and AI with the goal in 2025 to be visionaries only, massively increased volume of productivity, and massive decrease in expenses that do not need to be there. So I'm going to give a real life example of something that I've been working on for the last 60 days. I wanted in my agency to be able to triple the output of creative testing for my clients in 2025. And when I looked at the operating system that we were using, it was very constrained. We had our campaign managers and our strategists going to our creative lead. Our creative lead would then take their briefs, then they would go and disseminate them out to the vendors, the copywriters, the designers, et cetera. Then they would come back to that person. Then they would go to the client for approvals, and then they would want some things changed, and then they would go back to that person, and that person would go back to the other people. A very slow, very inefficient process. I looked at it and I said, with all the things I know about AI now, how can I make this much faster, much more productive, much more profitable? So we have strung together about 6 different tools, and we've changed our creative team from managers and executors to what I'm calling architects.
So changing the people structure around as far as what their roles and titles are, while also, it sounds like, eliminating a lot of unnecessary people. Friction.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Too many layers of people a lot of times creates friction, right?
And
you did have a lot of layers, which I think is good. And listen, I'll stop you there because I think that a lot of businesses have the right intention when they want to create a lot of layers, because what does a lot of layers mean? It means a lot of support, and it means a lot of value. But sometimes it can actually go too far, like you're saying right now, and create layers of friction that aren't really they don't really change the customer experience that much, but they weigh down the company and they slow the process.
You're exactly right. And one of my key people told me about 2 months ago, he said, I feel like I'm working for the government.
Oh, geez. We'll go there in a minute.
Right. And I was like, uh-oh. And he said, speed.
Like red tape,
execution.
right? Red
Yeah, he
tape,
said
red
there's
tape,
so
layers.
many layers of people and
Yep.
SOPs. And like you said, right intentions, we put those in place because as you make mistakes, which every business does, what we said is every time we make a mistake, we're going to look at it, we're going to create an SOP around it to make sure that never happens again. And frankly, our SOPs have been fantastic, and the mistakes have gone down considerably, which is great. But it's become very cumbersome and burdensome.
It's heavy. It's heavy.
It's heavy.
It's layers and it's
dynamic.
heavy, to your point.
Yeah. And the other side of it is the actual shifting of job roles. And if you're not paying attention to this is a key part for me to tell you in 2025. If you're still on the fence, I went out for a great dinner last night, rooftop, drinking wine with one of my buddies. He's exited multiple companies, super sharp guy. I was talking about the incorporation of AI into our business, and him and his wife kind of shocked me a little bit. They looked at me and they said, we don't really get it. We've dabbled with it a little bit. And it really brought again to my awareness that most people really have no idea the productivity and value that AI can bring.
I want to come back to that. Keep going, but don't let me forget the "we don't really get it" statement. Don't let me forget about that, because I have a couple points I want to mention on the "we don't really get it" as it applies to a few other things in society right now.
Right. So I gave them an example. I said, historically in my agency, we've got 5 copywriters. The account manager says, we need you to write these ads, these scripts, these website pages, these whatever. It goes to the copywriters. The copywriters charge per hour. They say it's going to take me 10 hours to write this. You say, okay, you're paying them by the hour. You're waiting for them to deliver it, la, 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 la. I realized earlier this year that copywriters, and I'm going to get some hate on this, but I'm telling you, the majority of copywriters are going to be out of business within 2 years.
You say the majority, which is probably true, but it won't be everybody, because because the really good copywriters who will embrace technology and also embrace human connection writing and can bridge the two together, what I like to call old school with new school, will be absolute surgeons in this space.
And what you just said allows me perfectly to transition into what we have done. So I went to our best copywriter on the team and I said, you are no longer a copywriter. That role no longer exists in this industry ever again. You are now a copy architect.
Fair.
And she said to me, what does that mean? I said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to take everything we have of assets from every single client, and we're going to put it into ChatGPT and Bard, and we're going to create a persona so the AI knows what they sell, who they are, how they speak, what are their preferences, what's their brand guide, all of these things. And once a month, you're going to go in and you're going to say, I need these 10 pieces of creative that need to follow these templates that we've already created, from messaging to flow to whatever. And you're going to press submit. And here's where your experience comes in. You can't just throw it into the system and take it as is, because it doesn't produce what you need typically on the first shot. You need to be able to look at it and know what's good and what's not. That's where the copywriting skill comes in. And you need to be able to reprompt it. You know what? Add more credibility. You know what? Add more of the things they've been successful at. You know what? Add some more pain. Change the tonality of the voice. So you keep reprompting it until you got exactly what you want. And you say, okay, now save this for the future because this is exactly what I want. But that requires somebody who is skilled at copywriting to know what they're looking at, what's good and what's not, and keep refining it. However, that person, Andrew, is going to be in charge of producing 300 pieces of creative in the first week of every month.
Good.
Did you catch that?
I got it all. I don't want to go into the weeds too much because we got a lot to cover, but big picture of what you're doing in the agency, I think the takeaway is what? Removing layers, getting granular with the few people that are left, kind of making them surgeons and architects.
Absolutely. And what it's done is it's dramatically increased speed, dramatically increased volume of output, and dramatically decreased expense versus when I'm talking to the people internally, they're like, "Oh, you can't do that. This is my craft. This is my this. This is my." I'm like, guys,
It's immediate resistance with anything new, which makes sense.
Right. So going into 2025, I will be going deeper into efficiency, output, AI. And it's not about cutting expenses. Everybody thinks AI is about cutting expenses. It's not about cutting expenses. It's actually about increasing volume and efficiency and increasing value.
There's a benefit of cutting expenses. It's one of many benefits.
Absolutely.
I don't think it's usually the chief reason, but I think it's one of the reasons that people will utilize it.
There's going to be a huge opportunity in two places in business that I'm doubling down on in 2025. One is incorporating AI into my own business. But if you were so inclined, there is a huge opportunity, and this leads to kind of what you're talking about with EOS. There's a huge opportunity to become the integrator or become the facilitator for businesses to show them what they can be using, how they can be incorporating it, and how can it improve their business outputs with AI. So if you're thinking to yourself, I really want to get into a new industry, like what's an industry that's going to be really valuable and really hot for a lot of years to come? Goes back to my question last night with my friends. Well, we don't really understand it. They want to, but they don't understand it. They're kind of scared of it. And so they're just avoiding it. And the people that are doubling down on it are screaming right past them.
I've got a lot to say about all this.
Do it.
So let me let you take a breath. But right off the bat, the AI thing is incredibly interesting. It's like any new technology that comes down the pipe. It is incredibly terrifying while it's incredibly promising at the same time. That's always a good thing. That reminds me of the internet when it hit. It reminds me of email when it hit. It reminds me of social media when it hits. I'm going to digital assets here in a second, right? It reminded me of crypto and Bitcoin and digital assets when it hit. Everything goes through this skepticism. It's a scam. It will never work resistance phase. But yet, if you can play both sides, it takes a lot of discipline and a lot of awareness, by the way, to be really balanced and independent and be able to look at the good and the bad in anything. Very few people can do it. Very, very few people can do it. They get really swayed with dogma easily, right? Their first impression of something, there's a terminology, it's called anchoring, I think, where the first thing they hear about something that becomes an anchor and they can't see past it. So if the first thing you ever heard about AI was that it's terrifying and it's going to ruin the world, then you're going to anchor to that and probably find a belief system around that, unless you're aware of it and you catch it. Same thing with Bitcoin. It's for years. It's a scam. It's not anything. It's invisible. It doesn't work. 1,000, 10,000, 30,000, 60,000, 90,000. And now you've got Wall Street banks buying literally trillions of Bitcoin. It's now a categorized digital asset, no different than gold. It's just not physical, right? So if you can look at the good and the bad and you can play both sides and you can somehow stay in the middle, that's where we are with AI today.